Most Gladiator owners have no idea what their truck is actually capable of. Hidden throughout the Gladiator are features, shortcuts, and factory tricks that even longtime owners drive for years without discovering. Today, I'm revealing 10 Gladiator features 99% of owners don't know about. And trust me, number 1 changes which trim you should buy. Let's start at number 10, the second battery. Pop the hood on your gas Gladiator and you'll find the normal main battery up front. But tucked off to the side is a second smaller battery, and almost nobody knows why it's even there. It powers the auto stop start system, the thing that shuts your engine off at red lights to sip a little less fuel. The clever part is what owners miss completely. When the engine cuts out at a stoplight, that little auxiliary battery keeps your radio and your air conditioning running, while the big main battery handles firing the engine back to life. However, that tiny battery is also the single most common thing that quietly dies on these trucks. When it gets weak, it can drag the main battery down with it, and your Jeep starts throwing strange warnings for no obvious reason. The truck even tests that battery on cold mornings by briefly splitting the two apart to check its health. Rack up 6 failed restarts in a row, and the system just shuts the whole feature off and asks for service. Therefore, if your stop-start ever quits, it's almost always that hidden battery begging to be replaced. But that's an easy fix. This next one you'll actually want to play with. Number 9 is the floor drains. Take the doors off, drop the top, and drive your Gladiator straight through a downpour on purpose. That sounds insane, but Jeep designed this truck for exactly that kind of abuse. Down in the floor there are little one-way drain valves that let water pour straight out the bottom, but won't let any of it splash back up inside. Jeep's own words are that you can lift up the carpet and wash out the interior with a garden hose. So if your buddies track half a swamp into your cabin on a muddy trail, you don't scrub it for an hour. You just rinse the whole thing out and let it drip dry. But owners only stumble onto the next part years later. There are marked punch-outs in the carpet sitting right over the visible drains. However, there are even more hidden drain plugs underneath the carpet that you can't see at all until you peel the whole thing back. Therefore, that mud bath you drove through doesn't have to live in your floor mats for the rest of the year. That one's for the dirt. This next feature hides deep in the screen. Next at number 8, the off-road pages. Buried inside the Uconnect screen, on trucks with the larger display, there's a whole menu Jeep calls the off-road pages, and most owners scroll right past it for years. Tap into it and your dashboard turns into a full trail computer. You get a live pitch and roll gauge that shows you exactly how steep a hill you're climbing or how far you're tilting sideways before things get scary. There's an altimeter reading your elevation, your GPS coordinates, and a readout of what your four-wheel drive system is actually doing under you. But there are 2 catches that trip owners up. That pitch and roll display stops updating once you push past about 25 miles per hour because it's built for slow rock crawling, not the freeway. And the elevation and coordinates only work right if your truck came with the navigation hardware. Otherwise, you just get blank dashes where the cool data should be. And there's a genuinely strange one tied to that same screen. Jeep had to recall over 11,000 Gladiators because the instrument cluster could short out and go totally dark. So if your display ever dies on you, you're not losing your mind. However, when it's all working, those pages turn a stock pickup into something closer to a rally car. Speaking of stuff you scroll right past, this next one disappoints almost everybody who tries it. If you're serious about making your Gladiator last for the long haul, check out my ebook, The 500,000-Mile Jeep Blueprint. It's packed with the maintenance habits, common mistakes to avoid, and proven strategies that help Jeep owners get the most life out of their trucks. Tap the link in the description below to grab your copy. Number 7 is the bed outlet. Order the cargo group, and your Gladiator bed gets a real 115-volt household-style power outlet mounted up near the tailgate. On paper, that's incredible. A truck bed that runs your tools at the campsite with no generator. But let me save you the heartbreak that owners feel the very first time they plug something serious in. That outlet only pushes about 400 watts of power, which is a hair shy of a single horsepower. So it'll happily charge your laptop, top off your phone, and maybe run a small fan or some lights. Plug a circular saw or an air compressor into it though, and it just shrugs and shuts off on you. Owners online openly roast it as the weakest thing on the entire truck. However, the same cargo group hides something that's actually worth the money, and it's called the trail rail system. Those are adjustable tie-down tracks running along the bed walls, and each rail can lock down around 250 pounds of gear exactly where you slide it. There's even a lockable storage cubby under the rear seat that lifts up to reveal a removable bin for hiding valuables. So the outlet is a letdown, but the cargo tricks built around it genuinely deliver. Real quick, if you're learning things about your own Jeep that the dealer never bothered to tell you, do me one favor and tap that subscribe button. That's number 6, the aux switches. Look just below your climate controls on a Rubicon or a Mojave, and you'll spot a row of 4 blank switches. They seem like buttons that do nothing, and a lot of owners assume they're filler for some option box they never checked. They are not filler. Those are factory auxiliary switches, pre-wired straight from the factory so you can bolt on lights, a winch, an air compressor, or a big light bar without ever butchering your own wiring. But the detail almost nobody knows is how they're rated. The first 2 switches handle a beefy 40 amps each, while switches 3 and 4 are smaller at 15 amps apiece. So you match each toy to the right switch instead of blowing a fuse on your first night out on the trail. Jeep even ran the wiring to 2 different spots for you, one bundle sitting near the battery under the hood, and another tucked away inside the passenger footwell. Now plenty of owners panic because the wires seem too thin to carry 40 amps safely. However, that fuse is sized to protect the wire on purpose, and any monster draw like a winch should be triggering a separate relay anyway. Therefore, those switches were ready for your build before you ever drove off the lot. But wiring is something you add. This next feature was watching the trail for you the whole time. Number 5 is the trail cam. Up in the grill of the higher trims sits a forward-facing off-road camera that throws the trail right onto your screen, complete with grid lines showing exactly where your front tires are about to land. That alone saves your bumper on rocks you can't see past the hood. But there's a secret feature hiding inside the feature. That camera has its very own little washer nozzle, a dedicated hose, and a tiny pump built just for the lens. So when thick mud splatters across it on a nasty trail, you push one single button and the camera literally power sprays itself clean. Jeep's own description says the washer lets you clear off any mud splatter with a simple push of a button. Almost no owner knows that nozzle even exists, so they squint at a brown smeared screen, swearing the camera broke. However, one tap of a button fixes it instantly. And because the whole thing runs through its own processing module, you can't just slap one on a base truck later without proper programming. Therefore, if your Gladiator came with it, treat that camera like a cheat code on tight trails. That camera helps anybody. This next number hides a secret even die-hard Jeep fans argue about. Number 4 is the Mojave secret. When Jeep launched the Gladiator Mojave back in 2020, it did something it had never once done in its entire history. It stamped a brand new badge on the fender that read, Desert Rated, the first one the company ever created. Every other trim is chasing slow rock crawling. The Mojave was built to fly flat out across open desert without shaking itself to pieces. So it gets some seriously special hardware underneath. It runs Fox internal bypass shocks with external reservoirs, plus an industry-first set of hydraulic jounce bumpers up front that soak up giant desert whoops like a trophy truck. It even bolts in tougher cast-iron front knuckles where the other Jeeps use plain aluminum, and it stretches the front track half an inch wider for stability at speed. But the twist catches buyers totally off guard. The hardcore Desert Mojave actually can't be ordered with 2 of the Rubicon's signature party tricks. You can't get the front locking differential, and you can't get the electronic sway bar disconnect, because those fat front shock reservoirs physically sit right where that disconnect motor would have to mount. The Mojave also never got the torquey diesel engine that other trims could, so the meanest-looking Gladiator gives up the famous rock-crawling toys on purpose. Therefore, choosing between a Mojave and a Rubicon isn't about which one is better, it's about whether you live in the sand or up on the rocks. And since we just brought up those toys, number 3 is where the Rubicon hides its weirdest trick. Number 3 is the Rubicon trick. The Rubicon is the rock crawler of the whole family, and it backs up that reputation with real hardware bolted underneath. It carries True-Lock locking differentials both front and rear, so both axles can force every wheel to spin together and claw up surfaces that leave a normal truck sitting there helplessly spinning. Pair that with deep, low-range gearing that gives it a crawl ratio around 77:1 on the automatic, which lets it idle up a boulder at walking pace. Then there's that electronic sway bar disconnect we mentioned earlier, freeing the front suspension to twist way further and keep your tires planted, before snapping itself back together automatically once you roll past about 18 miles per hour. The Rubicon can even wade through water around 30 inches deep without drowning. But there's a secret in the lineup that almost nobody ever talks about. You don't actually need the pricey Rubicon just to score a factory locker. The cheaper Willys trim quietly comes with a real rear-locking differential as standard equipment, while the Sport and Overland trims can option a limited slip rear instead. So a budget buyer who only wants that one locker has a back door that most salespeople will never mention to them. However, only the full Rubicon hands you both the front and rear lockers, plus that disconnect together. Therefore, the smart play is knowing exactly which trick you truly need before you spend a dime. But all that trail tech is the kind of thing you'd expect on a serious Jeep. This next number is pure hidden fun. Number 2, the hidden Easter eggs. Jeep designers absolutely love sneaking tiny secret carvings into every model they build, and the Gladiator is completely loaded with them. Run your hand along the windshield cowl, and you'll find a pair of little flip-flop sandals molded right into the plastic. That one isn't random at all. It's a quiet tribute to off-road journalist Rick Poway, who was famous for wearing flip-flops out on the toughest trails. Look a little closer, and you'll start spotting the 7-slot Jeep grille shape hidden inside the headlights, the cowl, and even the tailgate. There's an aircraft-style no-step warning stamped onto the bed rails, which is half a joke and half a real heads-up, since those rails are too thin to actually stand on. You'll even find a tiny Willys Jeep silhouette climbing up the corner of the windshield like a little mascot, plus another Willys stamp hidden away on the polished wheels. And every time you start the truck up, the screen plays a vintage, since 1941 animation, honoring the very first Willys Jeep from World War II, and on the fancy digital clusters, that Willys even morphs into a Gladiator right in front of you. So your truck is a treasure hunt you've been driving without playing. But hold that thought for 1 second, because the biggest shock on this whole list isn't hidden in the design at all. It's hiding in the spec sheet. And number 1 is the tow rating. Everybody just assumes the most expensive, most hardcore Gladiator has to be the one that tows the most weight. But it is dead wrong, and this is the fact that stuns owners harder than anything else. The mighty Rubicon, the priciest and toughest trim of them all, actually tops out around 7,000 pounds of towing. Meanwhile, the two cheapest trims, the plain Sport and Sport S, can be ordered to pull up to 7,700 pounds, and to haul a best-in-class payload of up to 1,700 pounds. So the budget Gladiator out-tows the flagship by a serious chunk. How is that even possible? It all comes down to one box on the order sheet called the Max Tow Package, which you can only add to those base trims. It swaps in steeper 4.10 gears, a stronger 240 amp alternator, an extra oil cooler, and a heavier hitch. Those chunky off-road tires and that soft, long travel suspension on the Rubicon and the Mojave actually hurt their tow numbers. And weirdly, the torquey diesel engine Jeep sold from 2021 to 2023, packing a massive 442 pound-feet of torque, towed even less at around 6,500 pounds before they quietly killed it off. Therefore, if towing is the whole reason you're buying this truck, the one you actually want is the cheap one with the right box checked, not the one wearing the biggest badge. But the wildest secret of all is sitting in your truck bed right now, and almost no owner ever finds it. Over on the driver's side, near the tailgate, sits a tiny heart symbol next to the number 419. That's the area code for Toledo, Ohio, the city where every Gladiator on the planet gets built. So the workers on that line literally stamped their hometown's heart into your truck. Jeep loved that number so much, the very first launch edition was capped at exactly 4,190 trucks. And out of every Easter egg today, that little heart belongs to the Gladiator alone. And that's our list of 10 Jeep Gladiator features most owners never discover. Before you go, comment below which feature surprised you the most, and if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button for more Jeep tips, hidden features, and ownership secrets. Then click the video on your screen right now to keep watching. I'll see you there.